Conestee. How are ye? Welcome to a storytelling session where we'll talk about the great hero of the Fianna. His name was Oisín. You might have heard of him. He's sitting right here. But he also went to Tirnanog. And legend has it, he spoke with the one and only Saint Patrick. But we'll get to that bit in another time. Because right now we must explore the Fianna. The Fianna of old in Ireland, with the greatest band of warriors. It was said they were so generous. Well, if the leaves had golden on them, or the foam of the waves were silver, and the Fianna had all the gold and all the silver in the world, they'd give it all away. So they say. They were unfailingly generous, often looking for adventure. And the greatest warriors, poets, bards, and storytellers there ever was. The leader was a man, you might have heard of him, Fionn McCool. And his son, well, his son was named Oisín. And Oisín means little deer. Do you know why? One day, Fionn McCool was out hunting with the Fianna, and they came across a little baby boy holding on to a rowan berry tree. And they saw him with big, brown, beautiful eyes. Fionn picked up the baby boy, not knowing where he'd come from, but recognized in his eyes the look of Sive, the lady love of his that had left him to go to the other world. She was a deer woman. She could run as fast as the deer, and she was turned into a deer by an evil dark druid. So Fionn picked up this baby. He named him Oisín. He knew this was his son. He had loved Sive long ago, but his heart was broken and only restored to full love and kindness in the presence of his son, Oshie. And so he reared him. He taught him everything he knew. He trained him to be one of the Fianna, to pass the vigorous tests to get into the Fianna, to chase through the forest without disturbing a single tree or bird in the leaves, to run as fast as the wind and jump over a pole as tall as your neck and duck below another one held as low as your knee. Of course, the pit where he'd be put into with only a stick to defend himself when from 100 yards away, the Fianna would throw spears and swords and shields at him. Well, he passed all those tests because he was Oisín of the Fianna. He was brilliant in every way. He grew up to be strong and heroic and beautiful at song and speech. He could bring a grown man to tears with one retelling of a great old tale. One day they were out hunting, which was Fionn McCool's favourite thing to do, to go out running across the forestry of Ireland, to go out hunting wild game with Bran and Skiolan, the two fearsome hounds of the Fianna. But Fionn McCool stopped the men just before they entered the glen, and he asked them a simple question that day. What was the favourite and best sound of all? They scratched their head. Gaeilge, the fast, grey, thin man, he said, it's the sound of footfall as you're running flat out across the fields, on the chase and in the hunt. Diarmid said, no, it's the sound of heavy breathing when in battle and a full fury of rage comes upon you and you defeat your enemy. still Gull McMorna. He said it's the falling of the leaves in autumn as they land and they crinkle underfoot. That's the greatest sound. But Oisín, he stayed quiet. He said not a word. Instead, he looked at his father, for he knew he had the answer. And sure enough, Fionn McCool said the greatest sound of all is the sound of now. Can you hear it? And when Fionn told them the sound of now is the greatest, to listen to the ever going on song that is right now in full presence in mind, they nodded and they smiled. They realized they were all right in their own way, depending on what day and what time it was. And so they went on into the hunt, and they saw two mystical birds flying overhead, chained in silver at the feet. Beautiful birds. And they followed them into the thicket, and suddenly a clearing was there, much like this. And the sun shone down, and there they saw a beautiful woman, long golden hair on her. And she had pale skin, emerald eyes, and she was sitting on top a huge white horse that bristled and neighed. She said her name was Niamh Kinó. And she wanted Oisín to come away with her to Tír na nÓg, for she loved Oisín hugely. And, well, Oisín was about to run and go, and yes, thank you very much, I'd like to go to Tír na nÓg for an adventure like no other, he thought. But Fionn put his hand on his son and said, wait, don't go before it's too late. If you leave me and go to the other world, the 3 times 50 islands of the magic world, I may never see you again. And this would break my heart. And so Oisín said, don't worry, Father. I give you my word, my promise, my bond that I will come back. And as you know, the word of any one of the Fianna is sacred. We have an honor code in the Fianna: strength of limb, purity of heart, and actions to match our words. Not one of us can lie. So Fionn said, have fun, son, but remember your word. And so Oisín leapt atop the horse's back and clung on to Niamh Kinó, and they felt love blossom between them then, as their heartbeat began to match each other's rhythm, as the horse began to gallop full and fast right on past all of the Fianna, who stared to see them blur through the thicket of trees, and out they ran away down the hillside, running and jumping over the rivers, passing the lakes, the mountains, until the sea breeze met their faces on the coast. But she did not slow the horse's gallop. No, Niamh Kinó kept on hitting the horse until it went straight into the waves and galloped over them as if it was running on a field of wheat. It was leaping over waves, its feet not falling into the water, as it gathered momentum and carried them so fast into a mist that seemed to come down and shimmer off the water. And suddenly the air smelled differently. He looked around and he heard strange sounds: seagulls cawing, monsters roaring, women calling, a girl smiling, and then he saw the girl skipping on a wave. And then he saw strange sights: a great tree growing up out of the water with golden apples upon it. They saw a castle built on a rock and the tip of it touching the sky. they saw islands upon islands upon islands, all over the horizon. As the mist left them, the sun bore down, and he realized he was in the other world, with the 3 times 50 islands of magic aplenty. And then they came to one island in particular, Tir na Nog. And when they got there, they saw everyone was full of merriment and merrymaking. There was so much love and joy on this island. Everyone welcomed Oisín and Niamh to Tir na Nog. And they were there and they were happy. A feast was had, celebrations upon celebrations, as they gathered round the fire to tell stories of the other world and of Ireland of old. And Oisín spent some time there in full merriment, and he realized no one got sick, no one got old, no one got sad on Tir na Nog. And so he spent his time in merriment and joy and love with Niamh. Until one day, he looked out across the waves and he remembered his promise to his father, his promise that he would return, and his word was his bond, and he knew he had to do what he said he would do. And so he went back to Niamh and he said, I must go back to Ireland and Fionn and the Fianna. She looked down then, an ashen look across her face. She said, oh, Oisín, time moves differently in this world. Perhaps you could go back, but promise me this, you will not take your feet from the holsters of the horse. Stay on the horse and don't land on the ground of Ireland. And come back to me in Tir na Nog. Oisín said, yes, fine, no problem, okay. He jumped on the horse, not really listening to Niamh's warning. And he rode across the waves. As the mist came down, a shimmer of the sunlight came, and he seemed to see something different in the air as he sensed a change as he came back to this world through the magic veil and portal between worlds. And he came back to Ireland then. And he noticed the forests on the land were chopped down. Great big grey roads, grey buildings, small, sickly-looking people, coughing and wheezing, spluttering. And he called for the Fianna, and he called for Fionn, but no one answered his calls. He realized with the tolling of bells from strange buildings, the time of the Fianna had come to an end. And then he saw 3 men trying to move a heavy rock up a hill off a road to make clearance for it. And he walked his horse over, asked the men if they knew where the Fianna were, but they shrunk back away from this huge, impressive, athletic-looking man, who rolled his eyes then, and Oisín leant down, picked up the stone with one hand that the 3 men couldn't move themselves, and he tossed it over his shoulder. But the horse, well, the strap broke on the horse, and he left his weight fall all the way down, and he hit the ground as the horse reared and ran away. And some say Oisín felt 1,000 years come upon him then, as the horse ran away back to Tir na Nog and back to Niamh Kinor, who saw the horse with no Oisín upon it, and her heart broke. Some people say Oisín didn't die that day. Some people say he met with Saint Patrick. But that's another story. Well, some people say that when Oisín fell off his horse after being in Tir na Nog, hundreds of years came upon him, and he turned into an old man. The three men who had been moving the rock, well, they came and carried this suddenly old man to the one man they thought could answer what was going on. The wisest man in Ireland, the one, the only, Saint Patrick. So, Oisín of the Fianna met with Saint Patrick. In fact, Saint Patrick was very pleased to see this legend coming towards him. Although he was old, he was still strong, tall, well able to work. And Patrick reminded Oisín that there was no hierarchies in class in Ireland anymore. You see, there was no kings. Instead, everyone was equal in the eyes of God. And so, if he wanted to stay with St. Patrick, Oisín was going to have to work for his bed and board. And so he put the great hero to work. Now, Oisín was none too pleased, I can guarantee you that. He expected a hero's welcome. He expected, well, royalties, food, wine, lots of parties and festivities, instead of working and labouring in the field for a meagre portion. Every day he would eat a skillet of bread, a churn of butter, and half of a cow. It's quite a lot in Patrick's book. He was aware Oisín was very, very strong. They talked from time to time and they exchanged stories. Oisín would tell him all about the Fianna. St. Patrick, well, he wondered, but he always got a scribe to write down the stories that Oisín told him. That's how we know they're true, because St. Patrick wrote them down so that he wouldn't lie, now would he? Now, as time went by, Oisín would fill St. Patrick with more and more stories of how great the Fianna were, how they defeated the cat-head and dog-headed army, how they defeated the king of the world on Ventry Bay, how they killed the king of Loughlin one day, and many more fantastic stories that Patrick always believed to a certain extent. He also thought he might be pulling his leg in a few details. But then he was eating in out of house and home. He was eating so much food, 3 times more than anyone else would eat in a single day. St. Patrick said enough was enough one day, that he might have to reserve this skillet of bread and only eat half of it. Well, Oisín was furious. He said he had seen ivy leaves bigger than the skillet, berries bigger than the churn of butter, and blackbirds bigger than his meagre, small, petty little cows. At this point, St. Patrick got very angry, and he did not like being taken a fool. And so he said, "This I cannot abide. I've heard your tall tales. I've heard your far-fetched stories, and I am calling you out on this. You are lying to me, and I am a man of faith and will not accept it." Well, when Oisín heard this, he demanded to know who it was that dared call him a liar. After all, he was one of the Fianna, and his actions were his bond to his truth. He could never tell a lie. So, St. Patrick told him not only had he rid the land of snakes, he had fought the fearsome Caertánacht, the mother of the devil himself. He had chased the great furious serpent and snake all over the land of Ireland, chasing her with holy water, throwing her until she got down to the bloody lake where she died after St. Patrick struck her on the side with his deadly sword. Once he took the head of Caertánacht, the lake filled with blood, and the mother of the devil herself died that day because of St. Patrick and his many great deeds. And he lit the fire on the hills to signal all the high kings come and praise the one true God and let their beliefs of pagan gods die. Well, Oisín thought this was all well and good. He might have fought with a great big demon, but he was Oisín of the Fianna, and he demanded to know where his father and the Fianna were under this new religion. St. Patrick claimed because They didn't have hounds in heaven because they didn't believe in God Almighty. The Fianna were in fact in hell, being tortured by demons and hellfire for the rest of eternity because they did not become Christian and believe in the one true God, and so they are not up in heaven praying to God all day long in blissful harmony and happiness. Oisín thought, I've been to the happiest place in the world. I've been to Tirnanog. I have seen what happiness is. I've seen the merriment of the other world. I've seen the Oshie people full of festivities. There's nothing that can beat the Fianna for heart, for truth, for honesty. And if they're not in heaven, I'd rather not be there at all. Well, St. Patrick realised he was at a roadblock with this Oisín. There was nothing to be done. They were angry at one another. But Oisín said, I will prove my word to you. You just watch out. And this is what he did. He called a serving boy to him. Okay, we're going to make a plan. This is what you do. Listen very carefully. Okay. I've seen a great hound give birth to a litter of pups. Get this litter of pups and stick a hide of a swine up on the wall. Fling the pups one after another up against the hide. When one of them clings on, bring that puppy to me. The boy did exactly what he was told and did just that. And when the puppy clung on, he brought that pup to Oisín. Okay, great. We've got the fiercest puppy of the litter. Now put him in a cold, dark place and feed him only food with no blood. Not a thing of flesh, only gruel and oats. No live meat to pass his teeth for a year and a day. And when he's fully grown, bring him back to me. And so he went and toiled and worked away on St. Patrick's land until the day the dog was fully grown. And he said, now today we'll prove St. Patrick wrong as we go to Glennismore. He brought the dog and the boy along with him, and Oisín went and dug under a huge standing stone that he recognised from a long, long, long time ago. And when he dug down, he found an iron ball, a great big sword, and a horn. And he blew on this horn 3 times. Nothing happened for a moment. And then the boy gasped. Look, on the horizon, a flock of giant birds, black feathers with berries in their talons, were flying towards them and through the sky, and a second flock and a third flock of even bigger birds. And now they were flying down towards them, and Oisín said, point me toward the biggest of those birds and give him the iron ball. And sure enough, once one of the birds was flying overhead, he struck the bird out of the sky, and when he landed, the dog went racing for him. And the dog and the bird, they fought, one with talon and beak, the other with teeth and snarls and snapping. And the bird and the dog, they clung together until one of them fell, and that was the bird. But the dog had the taste of blood suddenly on his mouth, and they came towards Oisín and the boy, and Oisín had to knock him out as well, so he wouldn't bite him because he had the taste of blood. But he got the bird, and he dragged him, and the bird in its talons had a great big branch of a great big tree they'd never seen before. And Oisín knew inside its belly was a berry of one of the rowan trees. And so he brought the bird down to Patrick, gave him a knife and told him to cut open the bird's belly. And he surely did. He took out a great big huge berry, the size of a churn of butter. Attached to it was a leaf the size of a skillet of bread. And the bird itself, St. Patrick had to admit, was at least the size of any one of his fine cows. And so St. Patrick had to admit that Oisín hadn't lied to him at all. Every word he had said was true, and all of the stories Oisín told him he had written down and transcribed. And that's how we know the Fianna were real and Oisín was true with every one of his words. But he was old, and he had to die eventually. And so Oisín lay on his deathbed, and St. Patrick came to try and talk him into being baptized, so he'd enter the faith of Christianity and go up to heaven with God and be peaceful forevermore. Oisín began to think of Niamh and Tirnanog and all of those that were so happy and at peace in the other land. Fan no maid, wait 1 minute, dún the veil nish. Be quiet now. And he recalled the beauty of Niamh, the beauty of the other world, and the sadness he had felt for not having himself back in Ireland with his father and Fionn, the people he loved the most, and for all of the loveliness and all of the niceness. He didn't appreciate it or love it when he didn't have the sadness to compare it to, because you can only know you're happy if you've experienced when you're sad. And so he said to St. Patrick, if Fionn McCool and the Fianna are in hell, being tortured by demons of hellfire, I think they'd be winning that fight, because nobody can beat Fionn McCool and Fianna. And so that's where I'll go. I'll go seeking adventure down in the fiery, flaming hot hell and pick fire. Well, I'll go down there and I'll fight with Fianna. And sure enough, Oisín of Tirnanog, well, he closed his eyes, he breathed his last, and he sighed for the love of Niamh Kinore, and he left this world forevermore. And some say there was the day that Oisín and his son Oscar and Fionn, they broke the chains with hellfire and went marching out of hell itself after defeating all of the demons of the other world, and they're still out there to this day, somewhere. So some people say.